I wanted to start with just very briefly giving you some background to our Sharing Spaces guide, and also to then give you a short presentation just covering the key elements of it. I'm not going to go through it page by page because that would take up the whole meeting. So the guide came out of, some of you may have attended the Cambridge Homelessness Conference in 2019, and some subsequent meetings that we facilitated for businesses. And the overriding thing we were asked for is the useful information, all the most up-to-date information gathered together in one place that people could access, and also, you know, to provide some other background and information that could support you in approaching rough sleeping and homelessness in the city centre. So the guide has been produced in partnership with Cambridge BID, with the police, with the City Council, local businesses, the street outreach team, and people with current lived experience of homelessness. Our plan is not to produce hard copies, simply because, as Melody from Winter Comfort pointed out to me on Tuesday, some of the information can quite quickly go out of date. So I plan to update it on probably a quarterly basis. So that's why we've decided not to produce hard copies, but of course it's available in a PDF version should you want to print that out. So what I wanted to do, I say, is just very briefly, I've just got to admit someone, there you go. What I wanted to do is just very briefly share a presentation with you that just covers very broadly the subject matter of the guide. So if you give me just one moment, just to share my screen. And okay, give me a moment. So yes, in terms of what we say, the key elements or the important elements to the guide, they're really broken down into values, avoiding blame, consistency, getting informed signposting, and how you do that for yourself or for any staff or colleagues. It's about building relationships and managing risks. So I just, again, very briefly wanted to touch on each of those subjects. In terms of values, I think those of us that are currently working with our homeless neighbours, these are the values that inform the work that we do. So we try to co-produce and at very least collaborate with those that have lived experience of homelessness. It should be community-based, as you can see. It's about achieving sustainable change for the individual person who may be in difficulties at the moment. So what we would say really is, do you have an organisational approach at the moment? And how does that link to your businesses and your own personal values? And how does your own team currently respond to perhaps somebody who you find has been sleeping in your shop doorway or you're concerned about? So what are those values? And we really ask, what outcome would you like and why, as a business or a church or an office, whatever you are? What is the outcome that you're looking for? Do you want that person to get moved on? Do you want to get support for that person? Do you want both? It could be a combination of those. And what we say is the intention is as important as the action that you take. So they're the values that we would like to inform any partnership approach that we take. In terms of avoiding blame, I mean, many of you should know homelessness is a complex subject. Very few people choose rough sleeping. When I was homeless myself, I was lucky. I didn't have to sleep on the streets, but this was in London in the 1980s, and I used to squat a lot. Okay, so that was my way of staying off the streets. But those people you see perhaps outside your shop or your premises, they're just the tip of the iceberg. As we know, the pandemic showed us that there are many people who are hidden homeless, sofa surfing or finding other ways to stay off the streets. And I won't give you a big long list, but the lack of affordable housing can be an issue. Many people who are on the streets are suffering from trauma and the associated behaviours. They may have a lack of their own social support networks. They may have come to Cambridge from their hometown, or may have just lost touch with those people that can support them. And of course, there's cyclical poverty. I myself, when I was trying to get out of homelessness, I found I'd take one step forward, perhaps find some accommodation, couldn't find the right employment, and therefore I was back homeless again. So what we really want to say to you is just to don't attribute blame and try to get yourself better informed. And in terms of consistency, we said, you know, what is the outcome that you wanted? And it's, I suppose one example would be if one of your members of staff turns up to open up in the morning and there's someone who has been rough sleeping, and offer them a coffee and a chat and some time. And then the following day, the next member of staff comes in and essentially tells them to go away, or you know, the police will be called or some action will be taken. That can create, on your side and on the part of the person that's homeless, that can create confusion and possibly resentment. So we really want to look at helping you to develop a consistent approach to rough sleeping and homelessness. Now, in terms of informed signposting, you'll find within the guide all of these services are listed and the contact details. So when my colleagues come on in a little bit to tell you about their team, that sort of information is available. But you can see the main areas, for example, the City Council's Housing Advice Service, the Cambridge Street Outreach Team. Sarah's on call with us today from the Antisocial Behaviour Team. We have Street Support Cambridgeshire, which I won't go into a lot of detail today because we're planning to do another webinar just around Street Support Cambridgeshire in May. And of course, we have StreetLink. StreetLink, I should very quickly explain to you, is the very simple process you can use from your mobile phone, which basically says, I've seen someone that I'm concerned about, they may be rough sleeping, or I've got some concerns about them. StreetLink, we would suggest, would be your first port of call for that. In terms of building relationships, obviously for that individual and for yourself, the situation may take time to improve. As I said earlier on, we may be dealing with people that are traumatized, people that may have a mistrust of authority. So really, it's as far as possible for your business and you personally, it's about how do you start to build mutual trust and respect with that person. And as we say there, we would suggest that you keep conversations neutral. You don't start sort of trying to ask people too many personal questions because that could just re-traumatize them. And one thing we're suggesting is, in order to build those relationships, there are a lot of organisations out there in the city that are always looking for volunteers. You can find all the volunteering information through Street Support Cambridgeshire, or you could contact us directly. But that could be a way that your staff could start to develop a better understanding of the sort of complex issues around homelessness in the city. Managing risks, it's simply saying, you know, obviously in any situation, whether you're dealing with somebody who's drunk coming out of the pub late at night or whatever it is, your personal safety is always important. One bit of advice we would give is if somebody is sleeping, it's not necessarily a good idea to wake them up. And also the guide provides information about if you find refuse and other rubbish around your premises, is who you contact and how you deal with that. So really, I'd say to you, do you have a managing risk policy? And is there something in that about homelessness or possibly antisocial behaviour around your premises? And finally, we may pick up on this in more detail in the question and answer session, because I'm aware that this is something that is of concern in the city. It's the issue about giving money. Do you give money? Do you give food? We would always say that whatever you give is a personal choice, but we'd also ask you to remember that begging and homelessness are not the same thing. So we may pick up on this later. Obviously, we would say that food and support is available 24/7, 7 days a week. And that's obviously, again, all that information of how you can find food and support for people is available through Street Support Cambridgeshire. And just finally, if you want to give money, we would suggest considering Cambridge Street Aid. Very briefly, they are an organisation where 100% of every pound you give goes to supporting somebody who is making the journey from street to home. So that could be used to buy them computer equipment or clothing to attend an interview. There's all kinds of things you can use Cambridge Street Aid for. So that's really the end of a very, very brief introduction. Please do keep in touch with me. Obviously, I'll share this with you after the meeting, but there are my contact details. What I would say as well is we would like to start a conversation around homelessness prevention amongst your staff, because statistics show that if you employ 5 people, the chances are one of them is either homeless or is in a precarious housing situation. So if you employ more than 5 people, you may well have somebody that is experiencing difficulties at the moment. So I'm just going to stop sharing.